All right, so you know how it is, like you're prepping for a big presentation or diving into some new field of study.
Or just one of those people who loves to learn something new.
Exactly. And we all kind of hit this wall sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
And that wall I'm talking about is procrastination.
Procrastination.
But get this, the stuff we're looking at today, it links procrastination and addiction.
It is so interesting, the way people just think procrastination is laziness,
Yeah, just like brush it off.
but it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, these sources we've got, they describe it as like dodging stuff, you should be doing.
Oh, totally.
Like when you have a deadline and you're just scrolling on your phone.
Or you start binge watching a show instead of doing that to-do list.
Yes. And it seems like for people who are dealing with addiction, this procrastination thing, it gets even worse.
It does, yeah, and the sources talk about how addiction basically becomes this coping mechanism.
Oh, okay. I see. So it's like a way to avoid those uncomfortable feelings or situations.
Exactly, and it all starts with those deeper reasons, those underlying reasons for why we procrastinate in the first place.
So like what's really going on in our heads when we procrastinate?
Well, a lot of times it's fear.
Fear.
Yeah, fear of failing, fear of judgment. Like imagine you're about to give a presentation
Oh, yeah.
and you're terrified of messing up or people thinking you don't know what you're talking about,
The worst.
right? Or maybe you're trying to learn something new and you're afraid of looking slow or stupid.
I can totally relate to that. Sometimes I feel like my brain just freezes up.
And these sources say all those fears can actually make us just avoid the task altogether.
So it's like our brain trying to protect us from those negative feelings, even if it ends up backfiring.
Exactly. And then there's that feeling of being totally overwhelmed, If a task just seems massive or too complicated.
Oh my gosh, yes, I'll admit, sometimes I look at my to-do list
Yeah.
and I just want to hide.
That's super common. And the sources mention another interesting point. It's about feeling connected to the task.
Connect.
Like, do you see the purpose, the meaning in it? If not, it's way harder to get motivated.
So we've got fear, overwhelm, and this lack of connection. And then you add addiction into the mix. And it seems like it just throws gasoline on the fire.
It really does. Because remember, addiction is often a way to cope. So you're already trying to avoid these uncomfortable emotions, and then the addiction comes in as a way to escape even more.
I see, it all ties together.
Yeah, and these sources, they use this image of a loop, a cycle that keeps repeating itself.
Interesting. So how does this cycle work exactly?
So picture this. You've got something you need to do, but you're feeling scared, overwhelmed, or just disconnected from it.
Yeah, and we already know that avoiding important stuff just stresses you out even more.
And that's when the addiction kicks in. You reach for whatever it is you do to escape those feelings, even if it's just temporary.
But then comes the guilt and shame, which just makes you want to avoid things even more.
Exactly. And boom, you're right back where you started.
Like you're stuck on a hamster wheel.
It can be really hard to break free from this pattern.
But the good news is these sources say we can break free. Right?
Yeah.
They offer ways to actually do it.
They do. And it's pretty amazing stuff. Ready to dig into that?
Absolutely. Let's do it. So breaking free. That sounds pretty good to me. How do we actually get off this hamster wheel?
Well, the first step is kind of surprising. It's all about understanding your feelings.
Okay, so like, what does that even mean?
The sources talk about this idea of hitting pause when you feel that urge to procrastinate and asking yourself, like, what am I feeling right now?
Instead of just going straight to avoidance mode.
Yeah, exactly. You got to give those feelings a name. Like, is it fear? Is it stress? Anxiety? Boredom? Whatever it is.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. But what about those times when those feelings are so strong, you can't even think straight, let alone actually do the thing you're avoiding?
That's where mindfulness comes in.
Mindfulness, I feel like I hear that everywhere these days.
Yeah, but what's cool here is these sources connect it right to procrastination.
Okay, so how so?
They're saying use mindfulness, not just to notice the feelings, but to actually see what triggers the procrastination.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of just reacting without thinking, we can start to see it coming and then make a choice.
Right. So let's say you're feeling overwhelmed by a big project.
Happens all the time.
Instead of immediately going to your phone or whatever you do to zone out,
Yeah.
mindfulness can help you just stop for a second and notice that urge without letting it take over.
So it's like putting some space between the trigger and our usual reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually a mindfulness exercise in one of the sources we can try right now.
Okay, I'm game for that. What is it?
It's called box breathing. It's a breathing technique.
I've heard of that.
First, just get comfortable, sit up straight or even lie down if you want. Now close your eyes if you want to, and we'll start by taking a slow, deep breath in, count to 4.
Okay, breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good. Now hold it for another count of 4.
Holding 1, 2, 3, 4.
And breathe out slowly for 4.
Out. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now hold it empty for 4.
Empty hold. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect. Now just repeat that a few more times. Focus on your breath.
Wow. I feel a little calmer already.
Right. And the source says even just a few minutes of this can make a huge difference in like shifting your mindset.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like creating a space to actually make a choice instead of just reacting.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got understanding the feelings and using mindfulness to interrupt the triggers.
Yeah.
What else do they suggest for breaking this cycle?
This is a big one. Self-compassion.
Self-compassion.
It's about being kind to yourself, especially when things are hard.
That's hard sometimes.
It is. We tend to have these crazy high standards for ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
And then when we mess up, which, everyone does,
Of course.
we beat ourselves up about it.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
But the source says that just feeds the whole procrastination addiction cycle.
Okay, that makes sense.
So self-compassion is about saying, hey, I'm not perfect, I'm going to make mistakes, and that's all right.
I like.
And it actually helps you face those challenges in a more supportive way.
So how do we actually get better at self-compassion?
One thing the sources suggest is to talk to yourself like you'd talk to a friend who's going through something tough.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Like, would you yell at them for making a mistake?
No way.
Or would you be understanding and encouraging?
Definitely the second one.
Right. So next time you catch yourself being super hard on yourself,
Yeah.
just stop and think, what would I say to a friend in this situation?
That's such a good way to reframe it. It's so much gentler.
It is. And remember, self-compassion isn't about letting yourself get away with anything.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing that we're all human. We all screw up sometimes.
We do.
And that's totally fine. The source actually has this visual to help explain it.
Oh, really?
They say picture a circle, and that outer ring is all the harsh critical thoughts we have about ourselves.
Okay, so the outer ring is like all the bad stuff.
Yeah, and then inside that is another smaller circle. That's the gently more compassionate voice.
So outer criticism, inner compassion.
Exactly. And when those critical thoughts pop up,
Like, I'm so lazy, I'll never get this done.
yeah, all that stuff. See if you can shift your focus to that inner circle.
It's like changing the channel to something more positive.
Totally. And with practice, that inner voice gets stronger.
This is great stuff. So we've got understanding our feelings, we've got mindfulness to deal with the triggers, and we're working on self-compassion. But what about those times when you're just totally stuck? Like you can't even take a tiny step forward.
That is a tough one.
It is.
And that's where support systems come in. The sources talk about how important it is to connect with people who get it.
Yeah, people who understand what you're going through.
Exactly. Because it reminds you that you're not alone in this.
It's like having a team of people cheering you on.
Exactly. And remember, asking for help isn't weak. It actually takes a lot of courage.
It does.
And the sources even have some tips for finding the right support.
Right.
They say start by looking for people in your life who are good listeners, who don't judge, and who, inspire you.
So not just people to vent to, but
Yeah.
people who actually want to see you succeed.
Right. And professional support is super important too, like therapists, counselors, coaches.
People who can actually give you tools and guidance.
Yeah, and they also say it might take some time to find the perfect fit, try different things and see what works for you.
That makes sense.
And building that support system is a process. It's not just a one-time thing.
Right. It's about staying connected and open to new people.
And being willing to ask for help when you need it.
This has been so helpful. We've covered so much about breaking this cycle.
I have.
We talked about feelings, mindfulness, self-compassion, and getting support.
It's a lot, but it's all connected.
It is, and it feels like these sources are giving us a real plan to follow.
Yeah, they really are.
But I'm curious, how do we take all this and actually apply it to our lives? Actually make a change. That's the big question, right? Like we've learned so much, but how do we actually use it?
Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road.
So what do the sources say about making these changes?
Well, they talk a lot about setting realistic goals.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to get carried away and set these huge goals that are impossible.
And then you just end up feeling worse and procrastinating even more.
Totally. So how do we set realistic goals?
The sources suggest breaking things down into smaller steps, manageable steps.
Okay, I like that.
Like instead of, I'm going to write a whole book, it's,
Yeah.
I'm going to write for 30 minutes every day.
Much less intimidating.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, as you start achieving those small wins, it actually builds momentum.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah. And you start seeing real progress, and that keeps you going.
Makes sense. Success breeds success, as they say.
The sources also talk about creating a supportive environment.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It can be a few things, like surrounding yourself with people who encourage you.
Like friends and family, maybe even a therapist?
Yeah. And it also means minimizing distractions.
Like turning off your phone.
Or finding a quiet space to work.
So it's about setting yourself up for success from the start.
Exactly. And they even talk about your physical space.
What do they say about that?
Well, a messy workspace can actually make you feel more overwhelmed.
Oh, that's so true. When my desk is a disaster, my brain feels like a disaster too.
Right. So taking a little time to tidy up, or even just having a dedicated spot for work, it can really help you focus.
Okay, so we're setting realistic goals, creating a good environment. What else?
This one's important. Reward yourself.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Seriously, celebrating those small wins is huge for staying motivated.
It's like acknowledging that you're doing something good.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything big either. Maybe it's just taking a break to do something you enjoy, listening to music, whatever works for you.
Yeah, or just taking a minute to appreciate what you accomplished.
And the cool thing is, these sources say that those rewards actually rewire your brain.
What? How so?
Like you start connecting productivity with pleasure.
So it's not just forcing yourself, it's actually making it enjoyable.
Yeah. And they suggest linking those rewards to specific goals. So let's say you want to write for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe afterwards you treat yourself to a cup of tea or something.
Like it's a little incentive.
And there's one more thing I want to mention. It's so important.
What's that?
Self-forgiveness. We talked about self-compassion, but forgiveness is like the next level.
Well, I think I need to work on that one.
We all do. The thing is, we all mess up. We all procrastinate.
Yeah, definitely.
But beating yourself up about it just makes it harder to move forward.
That negative self-talk is the worst.
It is. So the sources say, acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and then let it go.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is, but it's so much healthier than dwelling on it.
So it's about being as kind to yourself as you would be to a friend who made a mistake.
Exactly. And that's what self-forgiveness is all about.
Wow. This has been eye-opening. We've talked about setting realistic goals, making a supportive environment, rewarding ourselves, and even forgiving ourselves. It really feels like a solid plan for tackling procrastination and addiction.
It is. And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
It's a process. There will be ups and downs.
Like anything in life.
Exactly. But the important thing is to keep moving forward.
One step at a time.
With kindness and compassion for yourself.
I love that. Progress over perfection.
Every little step counts.
So true. As we wrap things up here, I want to leave everyone with something to think about. What if we stopped seeing procrastination as the enemy and started seeing it as a sign, like a signal that something needs to change?
Oh, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Maybe it's telling us that we need to rethink our goals or set better boundaries, or maybe even just take better care of ourselves.
Or maybe even that we're on the wrong path entirely.
Exactly. Like maybe it's a push to try something new, something that really excites us.
So the next time you find yourself procrastinating, ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me?
I'm definitely going to try that. This has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us.
Of course, it's been a pleasure.
We hope everyone listening found it helpful and inspiring.
And maybe even motivating.
Until next time, keep learning and keep diving deep.